The silence of the void was broken only by the steady hum of life support systems aboard Deep Shadow Station, humanity's furthest outpost beyond the Kuiper Belt. Officer Latai sat hunched over his monitoring console, the pale blue glow of holographic displays casting shadows across his weathered face. 3 years of deep space duty had taught him to recognize every normal pattern in the cosmic background radiation, every routine transmission from Earth, every automated beacon from the mining stations scattered throughout the outer system. That's why the signal that appeared on his screen at 0347 hours made him sit up straight, his coffee cup forgotten, as it floated away in the station's low gravity. Nguyen Hung, get over here, Latai called to his colleague, who was conducting routine maintenance on the quantum entanglement communicator. I've got something weird on the long-range array. Sergeant Nguyen Hung pushed off from the comm panel and drifted over, his magnetic boots clicking as they engaged with the deck plating. At 28, he was 5 years younger than Latai, but had spent just as much time listening to the songs of distant stars. One look at the display made him frown. That's not natural, Nguyen Hung muttered, studying the repeating pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. It's too regular, too. Purposeful. Latai nodded grimly. SOS, the old Earth maritime distress signal. But this is coming from outside our solar system, bearing 277 Mark 15. That puts it roughly 60 light-years away, in the direction of the Centaurus constellation. Could be a hoax, Nguyen Hung suggested, though. His tone carried doubt. Maybe some deep space mining crew playing pranks. From 60 light-years out? Not likely. Latai's fingers danced over the holographic interface, running the signal through various filters and analysis programs. The amplitude suggests massive power output, and look at this, it's not just radio. There are quantum resonance patterns embedded in it, almost like it's speaking to our quantum communicators directly. The implications hung heavy in the recycled air of the station. If this was genuine, if someone or something was broadcasting an SOS from another star system, it would change everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the galaxy. I'm sending this to Earth. Latai declared, his voice steady, despite the magnitude of what they might have discovered. Priority Alpha. Let the big brains figure out what it means. 63 light-minutes away, in the underground complex beneath Geneva, where Earth's government had moved after the climate wars, Admiral Pham Quang was reviewing fleet deployment reports when his aide burst into his office. Admiral, we've received a Priority Alpha transmission from Deep Shadow Station. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park announced, her normally composed demeanor cracked with excitement. You need to see this immediately. Admiral Pham Quang, a man whose 60 years had been marked by service in 3 major conflicts and the colonization of Mars, prided himself on maintaining calm in any crisis. But as he watched the analysis of the signal scroll across his quantum display, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the climate-controlled air. How certain are we that this is extraterrestrial? He asked, his voice betraying none of the turmoil in his mind. 87% probability, sir. The signal's point of origin, the power requirements, the quantum encoding, all of it, suggests technology beyond our current capabilities. Dr. Huang Lan from the Xenolinguistics Center is already analyzing the embedded data. Pham Quang stood, his impressive frame casting a shadow across the holographic display. At 6 feet 4 inches, with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much war, he cut an imposing figure. Contact President Truong Khan Lee immediately. We need an emergency session of the Planetary Council. The president's office, located in the same complex, had been designed to project calm authority even in the face of global crisis. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Lake Geneva, though most of Earth's leaders rarely had time to appreciate the scenery. President Truong Khan Lee, a former diplomat who had helped broker the peace that ended the resource wars, sat behind her desk, reviewing the preliminary report on the signal. Madam President, Admiral Pham Quang said as he entered, preceded by his aide, and followed by Dr. Huang Lan, whose laboratory coat was wrinkled from hours of intense work. "We have a situation that requires immediate attention." Dr. Huang Lan, despite her 45 years, retained the energy and curiosity of a graduate student. Her dark eyes sparked with excitement as she activated her portable holographic projector. "Madam President, I have completed the initial analysis of the signal. It's definitely artificial, definitely extraterrestrial, and definitely a distress call." The hologram showed a complex waveform pattern overlaid with translation matrices and probability calculations. "The signal contains multiple layers of information," Dr. Huang Lan continued, her voice gaining speed as her excitement grew. "The surface layer is the simple SOS pattern, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short repeated continuously. But beneath that, embedded in quantum fluctuations that our instruments can barely detect, is a more complex message." President Truong Lai leaned forward. "What does it say?" "It's a mathematical progression that transitions into what I can only describe as linguistic patterns. With the help of our quantum AI translators, I've made significant progress. The signal identifies itself as coming from a species called the Ziri. They're under attack, their homeworld besieged by what they term the Devourers, a predatory species that harvests other civilizations for biological and technological resources." The room fell silent except for the soft hum of environmental systems. Admiral Pam Kwong was the first to speak. "How long has this signal been broadcasting?" "Based on the signal's consistency and the quantum decay patterns, I estimate it's been transmitting for approximately 6 months ship time. But considering the distance, this attack began 60 years ago." President Truong Lai stood and walked to the window, her hands clasped behind her back. 60 years. An entire civilization crying for help for 60 years, and we're only hearing it now. She turned back to face them. "Admiral, what are our options?" Pham Quang had been expecting this question and had spent the last 4 hours considering every possibility. "Madam President, we could send a message back, but by the time it reaches them and they receive a reply, another 120 years will have passed. If they're still alive, which is doubtful." "Or," the President prompted, "or we send Fleet Doom." The words hung in the air like a pronouncement of fate. Fleet Doom, officially designated the First Expeditionary Fleet, was humanity's most powerful military force, built in the years following first contact scenarios that had until now remained purely theoretical. 25 warships, including 3 carrier-class vessels, equipped with the most advanced technology humanity had ever produced. "Fleet Doom hasn't been designed for interstellar travel," Dr. Hong Lan pointed out. "The distances involved—" "Actually," Admiral Pham Quang interrupted, "that's not entirely true. 2 years ago, Dr. Elizabeth Hawking's team achieved a breakthrough in controlled space-time manipulation. The Hawking drive can fold space, allowing near-instantaneous travel across vast distances. We've tested it on unmanned probes, but never with a fleet of this size." President Truong Con Lee returned to her desk and activated the secure communication array. "I'm calling an emergency session of the Planetary Council. We have 12 hours to make a decision that could fundamentally alter humanity's future." The Planetary Council chambers, a vast amphitheater beneath the Swiss Alps, filled rapidly as representatives from every Earth nation and off-world colony took their seats. The holographic displays showed not just the assembled delegates, but also representatives beaming in from Luna City, the Mars colonies, and the Jupiter mining stations. Humanity had grown beyond Earth, but it had managed to maintain its unity through the Planetary Charter, signed 50 years earlier. Admiral Pham Quang stood at the central podium, the weight of human history pressing down on his shoulders. "Fellow humans, I stand before you today to present a choice that our species has never faced before. We have received irrefutable proof that we are not alone in the universe, and that proof comes in the form of a cry for help." He gestured to the holographic display that filled the chamber's dome, showing the signal analysis and Dr. Huang Lan's translations. The Ziri civilization is under attack by a species they call the Devourers, a nomadic race that conquers worlds, harvests their resources and populations, then moves on to the next target. The Ziri have been fighting for their survival for 60 years. They are losing. Delegate Maria Santos from the Brazilian Federation raised her hand. Admiral, with all due respect to this tragic situation, what can we possibly do? The distance alone makes any assistance impossible. Not impossible, Admiral Pham Quang replied. Difficult, dangerous, and unprecedented, but not impossible. Fleet Doom can be retrofitted with Dr. Hawking's space-folding technology. We can reach the Ziri system in approximately 3 months. The chamber erupted in discussion. Delegate Chen Wei from the Asian Collective stood. Admiral, you're talking about sending our entire expeditionary fleet on a mission based on a signal we received just days ago. What if it's a trap? What if these Devourers are actually the victims and the Ziri are the aggressors? Dr. Huang Lan rose from her seat in the visitors' gallery. May I address the council? At the president's nod, she activated her portable display. Distinguished delegates, I've spent the last 72 hours analyzing every aspect of this signal. The linguistic patterns, the mathematical progressions, even the quantum signatures all point to a species in desperate straits. More importantly, we've detected no deception patterns, no hidden messages, no signs of manipulation. This is a genuine distress call. Representative Thomas Anderson from the North American Union leaned forward. Doctor, you're asking us to risk our most powerful fleet on linguistic analysis. What if you're wrong? Then, we learn something new about the galaxy. President Truong Con Lee interjected, standing at her position behind the podium. Fellow humans, our ancestors once believed the Earth was the center of the universe. They thought the sun revolved around us, that the stars were holes poked in the celestial sphere. Each time we've expanded our understanding of the cosmos, we've grown as a species. She paused, looking around the chamber, at faces both physical and holographic. We stand at another such moment. We can choose to remain safe in our solar system content with our little bubble of existence, or we can take our first step as a truly galactic species. The Ziri are not just crying for help, they're offering us a chance to prove that humanity isn't just another species confined to a single world. We can be protectors. We can be the ones who answer when the innocent call for aid. Delegate Yuki Tanaka from the Pacific Alliance stood. Madam President, the moral arguments are compelling, but we must consider the practical implications. If we send Fleet Doom and lose it, Earth becomes vulnerable. What if these Devourers follow our fleet back to our system? Admiral Pham Quang stepped forward. That's a valid concern, Delegate Tanaka. That's why Fleet Doom will be equipped with the Nova Protocol. The chamber fell silent. The Nova Protocol was theoretical, classified beyond most clearance levels. Only the highest-ranking officials knew of its existence. The Nova Protocol. Pham Quang continued carefully, is our ultimate contingency. Should Fleet Doom face overwhelming opposition, the protocol allows for the controlled collapse of a localized space-time region. It would effectively create a temporary barrier between Earth and any pursuing forces while simultaneously neutralizing immediate threats. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The implications were clear. The Nova Protocol was a weapon of unimaginable destructive power. Dr. Huang Lan stood again. If I may add something to the Admiral's explanation, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. The quantum analysis of the Ziri signal includes what appear to be technical specifications. Their technology is bioorganic, based on living organisms modified for specific functions. They've shared defensive protocols, communication frequencies, even what appear to be star charts. This isn't just a cry for help, it's an offering of alliance. The debate continued for 6 hours. Representatives argued about resources, risks, and responsibilities. They discussed the precedent such an action would set, the potential for galactic conflict, and the moral implications of both action and inaction. Finally, President Truong Con Lai called for a vote. The result was closer than many had expected. 7,891 in favor, 6,234 against, with 945 abstentions. Fleet Doom would go to war in another star system. Within hours of the vote, every naval facility in the solar system came alive with activity. Fleet Doom had been maintained in a state of near readiness for exactly this type of scenario, but retrofitting an entire fleet for interstellar travel was still a monumental undertaking. Admiral Pham Quang stood in the main hangar bay of the flagship UES Determination, watching as teams of engineers installed the Hawking drive components. The ship, nearly a kilometer in length, had been designed as a mobile command center, capable of coordinating the movements of the entire fleet. Now it would serve as humanity's first interstellar flagship. The fleet composition was the result of decades of strategic planning. 25 heavy cruisers provided the backbone of offensive capability, each armed with particle beam arrays, kinetic kill vehicles, and fusion torpedo launchers. 3 carrier-class vessels, the UES Skyforge, UES Starhammer, and UES Voidwalker, carried between them nearly 400 fighter craft and 12,000 MARS mobile assault and reconnaissance specialists, humanity's elite space marines. Marine Colonel Tran Min, a veteran of the Titan insurgency and the Europa Station incident, supervised the loading of his troops onto the Skyforge. At 42, he had led MARS units in every major conflict of the past decade. His scarred face and graying beard spoke of battles fought in the airless void between worlds. Colonel Captain Jennifer Walsh, the Skyforge's commander, approached him with a tablet showing deployment schedules. Final count shows 4,000 MARS aboard my ship, with the remainder split between Starhammer and Voidwalker. Are your people ready for this? Tran Min looked out at the organized chaos of loading operations. MARS troopers moved with practiced efficiency their powered armor, allowing them to handle equipment that would require heavy machinery for regular humans. Captain, my people have trained for every scenario we could imagine. Fighting in zero gravity aboard alien vessels in hostile atmospheric conditions. But 60 light-years from home against an enemy we know nothing about. He shrugged. We'll adapt. We always do. Dr. Hong Lan had taken up residence in the Determination's Xenolinguistics Laboratory, a space hastily expanded to accommodate the new equipment needed for their mission. Her team of 12 specialists worked around the clock, refining their translation protocols and analyzing every aspect of the Ziri signal. Doctor, her assistant. Dr. Raj Patel called from across the lab. I'm detecting new elements in the signal. It's getting weaker, but there appear to be geographical markers, coordinates within the Ziri system. Dr. Hoang Lan hurried over to the display. The signal that had brought them to this point was indeed degrading, the quantum components becoming increasingly unstable. They're giving us landing coordinates, she realized. Or rally points. They know someone might be listening. She turned to her team, energy crackling through her voice. I want every person on this project focused on extracting every piece of information from that signal before it degrades completely. Battle plans, defensive positions, enemy capabilities, anything that might help our people succeed. The day of departure arrived with little fanfare. Fleet Doom assembled in formation beyond Pluto's orbit, far enough from any gravitational influences that might interfere with the Hawking drive. Admiral Pham Quang stood on the bridge of the Determination, looking out at the greatest military force humanity had ever assembled. Fleet status report, he called. All vessels report ready, Admiral, came the response from his communications officer. Hawking drives synchronized and charging. Dr. Elizabeth Hawking. The Admiral addressed the woman standing at the specialized control station that had been her life's work. At 55, she had devoted her career to understanding the fundamental forces that shaped space and time. Her wild gray hair and intense blue eyes marked her as one of those rare individuals who lived entirely in the realm of theoretical physics. The honor is yours, Doctor. Dr. Hawking nodded and placed her hands on the control interface. Around her displays showed the massive energy buildup across all 28 vessels of the fleet. All ships prepare for spacefold initiation. Remember, this is uncharted territory. Monitor your quantum coherence carefully. She looked up at Admiral Pham Quang. Admiral, once we activate the drives, there's no immediate way back. The energy requirements mean we'll need at least a week to recharge for another jump of this magnitude. Understood, Doctor. Fleet Doom. This is Admiral Pham Quang. Today we make history. Today, humanity takes its first step beyond the cradle of our solar system. Whatever awaits us 60 light-years from home, we face it together. Initiate Hawking Drive. The space around Fleet Doom began to shimmer, reality itself, bending as exotic matter, and controlled gravitational fields warped the fabric of space-time. For a moment, that lasted eternity, and no time at all, the 28 ships of Fleet Doom existed between dimensions, sliding through folded space toward a destination that represented humanity's first act of galactic citizenship. The transition through folded space was unlike anything the crews had experienced. Those who tried to describe it later spoke of colors that had no names, of feeling simultaneously compressed into a single point and stretched across vast distances. Time became fluid. Chronometers showed 3 months had passed, but subjectively, the journey felt like both minutes and years. Admiral Pham Quang stood on the bridge of the Determination as the fleet emerged back into normal space. Before them stretched the Ziri star system, and immediately every sensor operator began calling out contacts. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy signatures," called Lieutenant Zhang Wei from the sensor station. 17. No 23 large vessels in orbit around the fourth planet. Configuration unknown, but they're not matching any of the specifications from the Ziri signal. "Those would be the Devourers," Dr. Huanglan said, quietly, joining the Admiral on the bridge. She had spent the 3-month journey, learning everything possible about their destination, and the view before them confirmed her worst fears. "Based on the signal degradation and the positions, I believe the Ziri homeworld is under siege." The fourth planet hung in space like a wounded animal. Even from this distance, the fleet's sensors could detect the signs of catastrophic damage. Sections of the atmosphere glowed with unnatural fires, and a massive structure, clearly artificial, had been constructed in low orbit directly above what appeared to be the planet's largest continent. "Sir," called Commander Sarah Jones from the tactical station. "I'm detecting energy buildup from that orbital platform. It appears to be some kind of harvesting device. It's drawing material directly from the planet's surface." Admiral Pham Quang felt a cold fury building in his chest. Everything Dr. Huanglan had translated was proving accurate. The Devourers weren't just conquering the Ziri, they were systematically stripping away their world layer by layer. "Fleet status," he asked. "All vessels operational, Admiral. Hawking drives will need 6 days to fully recharge for another jump. Then we make those 6 days count. Communications broadcast on all frequencies. Let the Devourers know they have company." The communications officer nodded and opened a channel. Admiral Pham Quang's voice carried across the void, translated into every mathematical and linguistic pattern they had developed during the journey. "Attention, unknown vessels. This is Admiral Pham Quang of the United Earth Fleet. You are engaged in aggressive action against the Ziri civilization. Withdraw immediately, or we will consider you hostile and act accordingly." The response came quickly, not in words, but in the sudden acceleration of the 23 Devourer vessels toward Fleet Doom's position. The ships were like nothing in human experience, organic-looking hulks, covered in what appeared to be both armor plating and living tissue. As they moved, space around them seemed to ripple, as if reality itself recoiled from their presence. "So much for diplomacy," Admiral Pham Quang muttered. "All ships battle stations. Prepare for engagement." Fleet Doom spread into combat formation, the cruisers taking forward positions, while the carriers moved to protected positions behind the main battle line. Within minutes, The first energy exchanges lit up the darkness between the stars. The Devourer weapons were unlike anything humanity had encountered. Instead of directed energy or kinetic projectiles, they fired what could only be described as concentrated decay beams that aged matter at the molecular level, causing hulls to crumble and electronics to fail through rapid entropy. The UES Retribution, one of Fleet Doom's heavy cruisers, took a direct hit from such a weapon. Admiral Pham Quang watched in horror as a 30-meter section of the ship's hull simply ceased to exist, leaving a gap that vented atmosphere and crew into space. Sir, they're trying to close to boarding range," Commander Jones reported. "Multiple Devourer ships are launching what appear to be assault pods." "Release the MARS," Admiral Pham Quang ordered. "All carriers launch all fighters. We hold them here." Colonel Tran Min had been waiting for this order. Aboard the Sky Forge, he stood before 4,000 of humanity's finest warriors, each encased in powered armor that represented the pinnacle of human military technology. "Marines," he said, his voice carried through the ship's communication system. "Somewhere on this battlefield is a planet full of people who have been crying for help for 60 years. Today, we answer that call. Today, we show the galaxy what humans do when innocent lives are at stake." The launch bays of all three carriers opened simultaneously, disgorging fighters and assault craft like angry hornets from a disturbed nest. The MARS boarding pods, each carrying 20 Marines, streaked toward the Devourer vessels, while fighter squadrons engaged the enemy's own small craft in a deadly dance among the stars. The battle raged for 6 hours. Fleet Doom's superior coordination and tactics began to tell against the Devourer's superior numbers and exotic weapons. 7 Devourer vessels had been destroyed, but Fleet Doom had lost 3 cruisers and taken heavy damage across the entire fleet. It was then that Admiral Pham Quang made the decision that would define humanity's entry into galactic civilization. "All ships prepare Nova Protocol," he announced. On the bridge, Dr. Huang Lan turned to stare at him. "Admiral, the planet, there are still billions of Zeri down there." "I know," he replied grimly. "The Nova Protocol won't target the planet. But that harvesting platform and every Devourer ship in the system, they all cease to exist. Now." The Nova Protocol had been theoretical until this moment. It required the synchronized exotic matter generators of the entire fleet, creating a controlled collapse of space-time that would effectively erase anything caught within its field. The risk was enormous. Too much power or poor coordination could create a permanent rift in space that might consume the entire star system. "All ships report ready for Nova Protocol," came the report from communications. Dr. Hawking, Admiral Pham Quang, turned to the physicist who had made this mission possible. "I need you to be very, very precise." Dr. Hawking's hands flew over her controls, calculating fields and forces that existed at the very edge of human understanding. "Field generators aligned, Admiral, targeting the Devourer fleet and orbital platform, initiating in 10 seconds. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, with no flash of light or sound that could propagate through vacuum, reality twisted. The 23 Devourer ships and the massive harvesting platform simply weren't. Where they had been, space rippled like disturbed water, then settled back into normal configuration. In the sudden silence that followed, sensors detected something new: ships rising from the surface of the Zeri homeworld. Dozens of vessels, clearly of different construction than either human or Devourer craft, moving toward Fleet Doom's position. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. It's in the same linguistic patterns as the original distress signal." Dr. Hong Lan moved quickly to her translation station. After a few moments, she looked up with tears in her eyes. "They're saying thank you. They're saying welcome, friends from the distant stars." Admiral Pham Quang felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "Signal the Zeri vessels. Request permission to establish orbital stations for medical and humanitarian aid. And broadcast a message on all frequencies Let the galaxy know that the Deathworlders have arrived. The term, Deathworlders, had been pulled from the Zyri transmissions, their word for species that evolved on particularly harsh worlds, and thus possessed unusual resilience and determination. As Fleet Doom established contact with the surviving Zyri leadership, it became clear that Earth, with its violent geological activity, aggressive wildlife, and extreme weather, was considered a death world by galactic standards. The relief efforts that followed the battle lasted 4 months. MARS teams worked alongside Zyri rescue workers to clear collapsed cities. Human medical teams shared techniques with Zyri healers, learning as much as they taught. The carrier's industrial fabricators worked around the clock to produce food medicine and construction materials. It was during these efforts that humanity learned the true scope of what they had prevented. The Devourer Planet Harvester hadn't just been stripping resources, it had been preparing for something called biological integration, a process that would have converted every living Zyri into component parts for Devourer biotechnology. Dr. Huang Lan worked tirelessly with Zyri linguists and historians learning about galactic civilization from beings who had been part of it for millennia. The Zyri spoke of dozens of species that had fallen to the Devourers, entire worlds left as sterile husks after the harvesting was complete. "They call you the answer," she reported to Admiral Pham Quang during one of their regular briefings. "The Zyri have been members of something called the Galactic Cooperative for over 1,000 years. It's a loose alliance of peaceful species, but they've never had the military power to stand against aggressors like the Devourers. Until now." Admiral Pham Quang stood at the window of his ready room, looking out at the Zyri homeworld. The scarred surface was already showing signs of recovery, new growth spreading from the areas that had been protected by underground shelters. "What do they want from us, Doctor?" "Partnership," she replied simply. "The cooperative has resources, knowledge, technology that we can't imagine. But we have something they've never had: the willingness and ability to fight when necessary. They want to offer humanity membership in the cooperative with special status as galactic protectors." Over the following weeks, the foundations of the Earth-Zyri alliance were laid. Fleet Doom would remain in the system for 1 full year, both to ensure the Devourers didn't return and to allow for the establishment of permanent diplomatic and military stations. The first human embassy on an alien world was constructed in the Zyri capital city of Veltar, while the Zyri established their Earth embassy in Geneva, just blocks from where the decision to send Fleet Doom had been made. Colonel Tran Min found himself appointed as the first human military liaison to the Zyri Defense Forces. His MARS troops worked with Zyri warriors, sharing tactics and techniques that had proven effective against the Devourers. The cultural exchange went both ways. MARS units began incorporating Zyri bio-enhancement techniques into their equipment, while Zyri forces adopted human small unit tactics and strategic planning methods. The real breakthrough came 6 months after the battle, when Dr. Huang Lan made a discovery that would revolutionize human understanding of space travel. The Zyri possessed what they called resonance gates, permanent installations that allowed near-instantaneous travel between star systems. The technology was based on principles similar to the Hawking drive, but required massive infrastructure at both ends of the journey. Admiral Dr. Huang Lan explained during a joint briefing with Zyri technical specialists, "They're offering to help us construct gates linking Earth to their system, and eventually to other cooperative worlds. This would make us a truly interstellar civilization." Admiral Pham Quang listened to the translation as a Zyri engineer, speaking through a bioorganic translation device, explained the process. The engineering challenges were enormous, but the potential rewards were beyond imagination. Humanity would go from being confined to one star system to being active participants in a galactic community. As the year of occupation neared its end, Fleet Doom had been reinforced by additional ships from Earth and had established a permanent presence in the Zyri system. The decision was made to split the fleet. Half would return to Earth, with news of humanity's new place in the galaxy, while the other half would remain as the core of what would become the Galactic Defense Force. The announcement of the Earth-Zeri alliance had effects far beyond the two star systems involved. Other species in the cooperative began reaching out requesting diplomatic contact with the mysterious Deathworlders, who had driven off the Devourers. Trade agreements were proposed, cultural exchanges planned, and for the first time in galactic history, there was serious discussion of creating a unified military force to defend against other aggressive species. But it was the message that Admiral Pham Quang sent to all frequencies broadcast from the most powerful transmitters in the Zeri system that truly announced humanity's arrival on the galactic stage. To all civilizations within range of this transmission, this is Admiral Pham Quang of the United Earth Fleet. We are the species you call Deathworlders, and we have heard the Zeri's call for aid. We have driven off those who would harvest the innocent, and we remain here as guardians. Let it be known throughout the galaxy, those who prey upon the peaceful will find that they have awakened something they may wish had stayed dormant. Earth stands ready to defend any who call for our aid against those who would destroy, rather than create harvest, rather than grow devour, rather than nurture. We are the Deathworlders, and we are no longer alone. The message would travel for years, reaching species that had never heard of either Earth or humanity. Some would dismiss it as the boasting of a newly emerged species drunk on their first military success. Others, however, species that had lost worlds to the Devourers and other aggressors, heard it as something they had been waiting centuries to hear hope. On Earth, the news of Fleet Doom's success transformed society. The knowledge that humanity was not alone, that there were peaceful civilizations that needed protection, and that Earth had the power to provide that protection, gave humanity a new sense of purpose. The old conflicts over resources and territory seemed petty in the face of galactic responsibilities. President Truong Lee, in her address to the United Nations, following Admiral Pham Quang's message, captured the feelings of many. We sent Fleet Doom to answer a cry for help from strangers 60 light-years away. In doing so, we discovered that humanity's greatest strength has always been our willingness to help others to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Today we are not just citizens of Earth, but guardians of peace in a galaxy far larger and more dangerous than we ever imagined. The transformation was not without its challenges. Earth had to rapidly expand its military and diplomatic capabilities, train new generations of officers for interstellar service, and adapt to technologies and concepts that challenged fundamental assumptions about physics and biology. But humanity proved remarkably adaptable, a trait that the Zeri and other cooperative species found both admirable and somewhat terrifying. Dr. Huang Lan, now serving as Earth's chief xenolinguist and cultural liaison, often reflected on how a simple signal, picked up by two officers at a remote monitoring station, had changed everything. The universe had turned out to be far more crowded, dangerous, and wondrous than anyone had imagined. But it had also proven that the values humanity held dear, the protection of the innocent, the willingness to sacrifice for others, the determination to fight against overwhelming odds, were not uniquely human concepts. As the first permanent gate between Earth and the Zeri system neared completion, Admiral Pham Quang stood once again on the bridge of the Determination, now permanently stationed in Zeri space. The ship had become more than a flagship. It was a symbol of humanity's commitment to its new galactic responsibilities. Admiral, his communications officer, called, "We're receiving a new distress signal. Long range approximately 40 light-years spinward. The linguistic analysis suggests it's from a species called the Kalti." Admiral Pham Quang smiled grimly. "Plot a course and signal Earth. It seems the Deathworlders have another call to answer." The galaxy had learned something important in the months since Fleet Doom's arrival in the Zeri system. The species from the small, blue-green world in the Sol system were exactly what they claimed to be. They were Deathworlders in every sense of the term, beings forged by a harsh world who had emerged into the galaxy, ready to protect those who shared their values of freedom, cooperation, and the right to exist without fear. The Devourers had made a critical error in targeting the Ziri. In drawing humanity into galactic affairs, they had awakened a species that would prove to be their most dangerous enemy. But more than that, they had given the galaxy something it had never had before: a species willing and able to stand as protectors of the weak. As Fleet Doom prepared for its next mission, the message continued to propagate across the galaxy, reaching new species each day. We are the Deathworlders, and we are no longer alone. For the peaceful civilizations of the galaxy, it was a message of hope. For those who preyed on the innocent, it was a warning that the rules of galactic politics had fundamentally changed. Humanity had spent millennia dreaming of the stars, imagining what they might find when they finally reached them. They had found wonders beyond imagination, knowledge that revolutionized their understanding of the universe, and friends among species so different that communication required quantum translators. But most importantly, they had found purpose. The galaxy needed guardians, and Earth had produced a species uniquely suited to that role. The age of the Deathworlders had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Years later, when galactic historians wrote about the turning point in the balance between aggressive and peaceful civilizations, they would mark it as the day Fleet Doom arrived in the Ziri system. The day a species from a small world on the edge of the galaxy heard a cry for help and responded with such overwhelming force that even the most aggressive predator species began to think twice about their next target. But in Admiral Pham Quang's personal logs, the entry for that day was simple. We came when called. We did what was necessary. Tomorrow we'll be ready to do it again. The SOS from 60 light-years away had been answered. The Deathworlders had arrived on the galactic stage, and they had made it clear that they had no intention of leaving.